Joining me now, Democratic Congressman David Cicilline. He is the co-author of the article of impeachment charging President Trump with incitement of insurrection. And Congressman, I want to get into that article very shortly. But first, I do want to ask you, our understanding is the Democratic lawmakers were briefed overnight about possible threats to the U.S. Capitol and the inauguration. Is there anything you can tell us about what you were all told?
There is not anything I can tell you. I will say, though, we were provided a briefing that also included the details of the work that's being done to ensure that the inauguration proceeds safely. And while I think there's more work to be done, I have confidence that that will be the case.
All right. The article of impeachment that you crafted, it focuses on incitement to insurrection. What do you think you will have to prove in order to win that vote?
Well, I mean, at the outset, it's important to recognize this was an attack on our democracy, an attack on the Capitol in the middle of a very sacred ritual, the Electoral College, when the votes of millions of Americans are formally recognized and the president is elected and the peaceful transition of power occurs. These rioters, these domestic terrorists, were incited to march to the Capitol for the purpose of disrupting that process, and in doing so, to undermine our democracy, keep Donald Trump in office, and not allow the peaceful transition of power. They came here to lynch the vice president, to hang him, to assassinate the Speaker of the House, to hunt members of Congress. 5 people died. Lots of damage was done. Dozens of law enforcement officers were injured. This was a brutal and violent attack on our democracy, and Donald Trump incited this by promoting the big lie that he in fact won the election by millions of votes, but it was stolen from him. Something he's repeated and tweeted about and made statements about and whipped up the rallies about. And that morning he continued with the lie and told them to go fight, show their strength. He had speakers say we're going to have to engage in combat. And so all of that whipped up these folks and you're not going to have a country unless you go and fight. And so it was inevitable that as a result of that language and those statements and the big lie, that he sent these rioters to the Capitol to march and disrupt the proceedings and attack the Capitol and attack our democracy. So I think we will demonstrate unequivocally that the president's language, the statements he made, the promotion of the big lie made violence at the Capitol inevitable. He's responsible for it. He needs to be removed from office immediately. He's a clear and present danger to the United States.
Does it meet the legal definition of incitement, and how important is that in an impeachment vote?
Yes, we will file an impeachment report today, about a 40, 50-page report that details the legal basis, that details the facts that we all witnessed and saw. You know, there's not a lot of investigation that needs to be done. We were all witnesses to this or victims of this. We all publicly saw the president's statements and his tweets. So this will lay it out in more detail, but it is absolutely sufficient to sustain the burden of proof for impeachment, and a senator to try him immediately and remove him from office.
You keep using
delay.
the word immediately. I think it's safe to say no matter what the House does, and it looks inevitable that you will impeach the President of the United States tomorrow, I think it's safe to say the Senate is not going to hold a trial to remove him immediately. So
well,
how much? Well,
I hope that's not the case.
I know you hope it. I know you hope it. But the indication is that Mitch McConnell isn't going to do it. So how much should that or does that affect your decision making?
Well, it shouldn't affect it at all. Look, we took an oath of office just a few weeks ago to protect and defend the Constitution, and that means to protect and defend our democracy. Our democracy was attacked. We have a responsibility to honor our oath of office, to hold the president and everyone who was involved in this attack, this insurrection on the government, accountable. The only tool available to us is impeachment. We've called on him to resign. We've called on Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. If that doesn't happen, Congress is left with one tool that our framers gave us for impeachable offenses, and that is impeachment of the president. We intend to do that. The Senate should do their job. But what the Senate ultimately decides to do is the Senate's responsibility. Our responsibility remains, and that is to impeach the president and remove him from office immediately.
One piece of reporting I heard overnight, which really I find very interesting and perhaps might inform Republicans going to vote tomorrow. Axios is reporting that President Trump, in a phone call with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, was still saying it was Antifa who was behind the insurrection. It was Antifa who was doing the violence. Now, according to Axios, McCarthy, maybe for the first time, actually pushed back on the president. But the fact that he's still spreading these lies, these conspiracy theories, what does that tell you about the importance of what you're doing?
Well, I tell you that Donald Trump is not going to change. He remains a danger to the well-being of the United States. He remains, if left in office, it is very likely that he will engage in additional grave misconduct that will harm our country and the safety of those who serve in Congress or others. And so, this is, again, a president who's unwilling to accept responsibility for his own conduct and always trying to blame somebody else. The FBI said Antifa had no presence whatsoever on Wednesday. That's another lie. And this is just evidence that Donald Trump is not going to change who he is. He's a danger to the country. We have a responsibility. Look, this is days before we're going to have a new president. The last thing we want to be doing is impeaching a president. But we have a solemn responsibility in the face of this evidence and this conduct and the danger this president presents to move forward. We invite our Republican colleagues to join us. This is an important moment where the country and the world is watching how we respond to this attack on our Capitol.
Give me a number. How many Republicans do you expect to vote with you?
I hope we will have a dozen at least. I think we'll have somewhere in that range. I hope we have many more, but I don't have a clear. I'm talking to as many Republican colleagues as I can to convince them how important it is that they join us.
One of the changes that you made in the article of impeachment, again, which you wrote, and you are the author of this, was to include a reference to the 14th Amendment, which deals with making sure people who are involved in supporting insurrection or war against the United States can't hold elected office. Why did you decide to include that?
Well, the 14th Amendment makes a person who engages in an insurrection against the United States ineligible to hold office, which makes sense. If you led or incited or participated in an overthrow of the government, you ought not have the privilege of serving in it. And so, that's the conduct of the president that's at issue here. And I thought an explicit reference to the 14th Amendment was important because it may be that by itself is disqualifying without any additional action. And it certainly is insurrection. That is, the conduct of the president was an attempt or inciting an attempt to overthrow the government and substitute the judgment of the rioters for the judgment of the American people. It's a classic case of insurrection. So I thought it was important to reference the 14th Amendment.
David Cicilline, Congressman from Rhode Island, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.